people to come in, and he had a church for them. It's a fantastic book. All Star Mission Churches, you should get it, because it'll help you think about this question, even if you can't do it all. But like one of the examples they used is a guy goes into a church, and they, like a lot of our churches, support, right, 20 different missionaries or something like that. You know, I call that contributing, but churches, us missionary guys, we call that contribute, because supporting is a much different word, right? I'd love to go into one church that supported 20 different missionaries, because that's a honking budget, right? That's like $500,000 going straight to missions. I would just love to say to that church, thank God for you, if we can find one. But what they did is they came in and they said, well, this is ridiculous. We're not really doing much, going back to having a real impact, having a tangible impact. We're given 100 or 150 bucks to 20 different people, and what do you get? So they went back to their missionaries, and they said, we're going to be making a change over the next couple of years. And they cut it down to like 3 or 4. And they said, we're pouring everything into you guys. But now there's a responsibility with that, and this is what it is. We want you to come back for 1 month of the year, or something like this, and be our missionary in residence and teach us. Man, I'd do that. I wouldn't care if your church was up in the sticks in Montana, and I hate snow. If the church said, we're gonna come on board, Dave, and make this happen for you, I'd do it in a minute. And what missionary wouldn't do that? Because we'd know that somebody has our back. And that's just one of those things kind of growing out of what missions is becoming and what it is now. But going back, I think too, one of the things, and I really believe this, and this is particularly hard for short term. I don't know how this necessarily works in short term, and I've talked with people, and nobody has kind of the key to this, but culture fits within this. I mean, it just really does. I mean, anytime you, it's funny, did you do Redeeming Culture?
We tried, but I think the defining of the terms was just an impossibility.
Right. This is a big deal, but I really believe that people that are serious about missions over the long haul, and this can be both long-term and short-term, understanding long-term as somebody who's living in that country for the majority of the year, right, or working in that country for the majority of the year. And even the short-term person, if that short-term person is committed to returning to the same place or country multiple times, you need to learn about the culture of the area. You just need to know it. And I go back to Paul's example in Acts, Luke's example in Acts of Paul, right, where they left Berea, and he was there with Timothy and Silas, and they were reasoning, right, and then he leaves that area because the brothers were worried about what was going to happen, and he goes to Athens, and then he starts talking with the philosophers, right, with the Epicureans and with the Stoics. And here's what's interesting about this. Paul knew what he was talking about, right? He knew what he was talking about because it was important to him. But it goes even further, because he gets down to the end of the passage, almost in kind of a throwaway line, because we talk about, where it says, he says, I'm going to now tell you about that unknown God that you don't know, because they have all these altars in the city to the unknown God, right? And if you look at most commentaries, that's where they focus. Now Paul is going to preach the gospel message as we know it. He's going to explain the whole thing, and then at the very bottom, right, this word in there just jumps out at me, and it says poets. That's a fantastic word. Poets. Even your poets have said. To me, it doesn't matter what they said. What's important is that Paul knew what their poets had said. What does that say about his commitment to a people different than he was? It says that he worked hard enough to learn their culture. You know, a guy who traveled all over the world. Clearly, you know, he didn't stay in one place all the time, but he worked and he valued understanding the roots from where the people that he was serving had come. That's a huge thing. And people in the field, those who we serve, when they see that in a missionary, man, you've won the conversation. You've won the right to be heard on whatever it is, because they know you care about them, for them, and they know that you're working to understand them. It isn't just caring about them for the sake of getting more people to believe like you do and to become part of your church or to become part of Christianity. You cross a bridge that's unbelievably important. Now, the difficulty is that, unfortunately, a lot of missionaries don't believe this. And that gets played out in the mission field. And locals see that, and then they keep their distance. It's an amazing, it's just an amazing thing that's there. I mean, because you know, the poets are the, you know, are almost like the clarion folks in where they're at. I can't tell you. I mean, even the other night, I was at an event here in the city for Mexico, and you know, I'm certainly I'm in the minority. This was about Mexico. This was Mexicans for Mexico. The Taste of Mexico, celebrating even what they would define as real Mexican food. You know, in light of Gustavo Arellano has this new book out, Taco USA. It's a fun book. I mean, if you love the whole thing about Mexico, get this book. The guy's unbelievably irreverent, but it really starts to push you in how you think about Mexican culture in the U.S., right? But he says, even if you know, John and Cecilia Smith open up a restaurant and they're making basically tacos out of hard Rosarita shells with ground beef and shredded lettuce and tomatoes and yellow cheese on them, he says, that's Mexican food. Now that was clearly not the view that was on display here Friday night at Taste of Mexico. But people came up to the white guy and they said, Dave, Mexico has a new president. What's your perspective? Well, they knew, number one, that I would have a perspective, and number two, that I had really thought about that and looked at it, because that's where I serve. And I think it's important to know that stuff. I was with a guy 20 years ago in a village in Mexico, very rural village, and we were walking around, and something had happened to the chickens of Hermana Gloria. And so I asked the missionary, I said, well, you know, what happened? I have no idea. So I asked Gloria, what happened? She says, I don't know what it was, but I think it was the chupacabra. Cool. I don't know if you know what the chupacabra is, but you know, if you translate it directly, it's like goat sucker or something like that, right? But it's this mythical creature in Mexico that would not only wipe out your animals, but might come and steal your young children and kill them too. Right? It's almost like the Mexican equivalent of the Loch Ness Monster, but it was on dry land and would come there. And so her and I talked about that, and the in-country missionary who had given, at this point, most of his life to this area was sitting there, and we got all done and we walked out, and he says to me, he says, what's the chupacabra? And I'm thinking, oh man, like Houston, we've got a problem here. Because if the in-country missionary doesn't know something as in a sense, easy as that, then mission needs to be redeemed a little bit, in that case. He shouldn't have been there. Because he had no, David Livermore calls it cultural intelligence about where he was serving. CQ. I don't know, have you guys heard of Livermore? Other than his book, Serving with Eyes Wide Open? You should probably go to his site, davidlivermore.com, and he has some fantastic stuff, not only on cultural intelligence and culture, but what can we do now, and what can I do now in my community to make a difference from a gospel perspective. It's good stuff. I'm just kind of thinking about that. Let me throw another thing out here for you to think about as where we go on missions in a country that primarily we deal with short-term mission. Okay. Brian Howell recently has written a book called Short-Term Mission and Ethnography. I think that's the exact term. And he's wondering, certainly he's probably on my side of thinking in that short-term mission trip is bad, right? But he's also saying maybe we should take mission out of that, right? Are they? He would say, are they really mission trips? Maybe going to what you were saying about more like vision, a trip type thing, right? And I could see that. I'm okay with it. It's a good book. It's worth the read. It's it's not a page turner, that's for sure. Telford's book, you'll want to read it. This one you're going to have to work. It's a little dry, but it has good stuff. But I would push back, and I might say this, that I think short-term mission is going to be most effective when it's in support of the long-term goals of either the long-term missionaries or your long-term partners that are over there. And so then they don't necessarily all have to be just vision trips, right? I mean, I know there's a lot of folks that would say, well, Dave, we don't want to just do, what good's a work trip? Well, I mean, here's the reality of what a work trip can do. Without that work trip, those of us that are working in country to accomplish the goals of the kingdom, right, and extend, Jesus' love to the, in our case, the poor and the broken and the unreconciled. There's things that we need done that we can't get done without those groups that are coming, not just for vision, but in a sense to do something. But you've got to work with partners that really understand that. And I think even looking long-term, when you look at long-term missionaries, again, to me, we need long-term missionaries in countries across the world doing mission in a way that we believe God has called us. But I don't think we can get it done without short-term support. And that seems to be the difficult thing. We can't get long-term people to buy into that yet. Maybe because we're not using the right words, or we haven't found the right way to do that. But if we could solve that relationship, if we could somehow wed short-term to long-term for the greater good, then I think we'd really see something. I mean, that'd be really exciting. That would be really exciting to see. Because then it's not, well, we're going to do this because this is what we want. Right? We're listening to the field. The field wants people as short-term because they see that there's value there. It's never going to be perfect. That's just not going to happen. But I bet we could really improve our mission, our serve. I bet the kingdom would be better off. I think God's creation across the board would just be unbelievably blessed if we could fix that relationship. And maybe that's the whole thing about Redeeming Mission. In bringing that whole kind of thing under one roof and getting people to sit in rooms, maybe like this sometimes, and talk about how can my church, Bill, how can we help your mission in Romania? Understanding the reality that maybe or maybe not, but probably not, we're not going to be able to support you 100%. We can't just write you a check for 50K, for your salary. And we have people that come, that are willing to come, and that when they come, they'll bring some money into your ministry. Is there something you want to do with that? Can you structure your ministry in that other country in a way that will enable short-term people that have hearts of gold, right, to come and be part of what God's doing there? How do we make that happen? I don't know what that answer is, but I think that's part of the solution to the question of redeeming. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely see how the relationship between long-term and short-term teams can be really effective. Definitely speaking to some long-term missionaries, they feel sometimes that there's a disconnect between the short-term team and the long-term team, and they kind of want to do their own thing, and the long-term team have their goals and what they want to see happen. But I definitely think that people are aware of that there's a disconnect, and they want to bridge that gap again.
Someone else?
In terms of addressing redeeming missions, I think a lot of times we begin to redeem it without, searching for an end goal. So for you, what do you think it could look like for the Western Church if God did a crazy work, or just gave it a really big kick in the butt? What could it look like? In the way that Paul in the New Testament, and they're planting churches and doing a lot of effective ministry, how would that play out today?
One of the things that I really appreciate about Paul in his letters is he says, I long to be with you. And going back to a little bit to what Ike said, it's interesting. I don't think I've heard him say, I long to be at home. Right? Paul was constantly looking for where he could be over there, and even though he didn't stay in particularly one community, he was always, I think, on mission, which comes back to where I am. Wherever he was at, he was on mission. But he looked at the people whom he was serving, and he would say, I long to be with you. I think of you often. I pray for you often. And I think if that miraculous work of the Holy Spirit was to happen in the U.S. church, we would think like that. Right? That would be maybe where our hearts would be inclined. I sat with a guy, a while back, and we were reading some of that stuff from Paul, and he says to me, and this is a missions guy, he says, Dave, I don't feel like that. He says, I love the people I serve over there, but I don't feel like that. And maybe that's the key, right? We should, and whether it's whether it's that person who's down on Skid Row, whether it's the person who is on the set, at a movie being filmed, whether it's somebody who's in Oaxaca, whether it's somebody in China. For me, I just believe that everybody probably has someone, somebody, or some group that if they're open to it, God will break their heart for those people. And if we open ourselves and allow God to do that and then follow that, I think that would just be transformationally revolutionary. I mean, I just believe that. I can't put any stats to it, right? I can't say that, we've done our research and we know that 96% of the people, who does your heart break for? And if your heart doesn't break for anybody, then the question is, why not? And I'd say, just like when we look at trying to come up with a definition of mission, right? Sometimes we make that definition so broad that everything is mission, which then some of us would say, which means nothing is mission. For the person who says, well, my heart's just broke for the people of God. Okay, yeah, right. Come on. To me, that's a little bit of the cop-out answer. And I know that's hard, but that's just where I'm at. I mean, there's probably somebody somewhere when you see it, man, that if you're really opened up, you just look at it and you get down on your knees in tears. It would just break your heart. Everybody sitting in our churches probably has that person. If we respond to that call, I mean, think what the world would look like, right? I mean, just think what the world would look like. The person who says that I can't stand by and watch young women, young girls being sold into sexual slavery, so I'm going to do something. And they do it, and they commit their life to doing it. That's the kind of person who makes a difference. Right? And you may not even know, honestly, on that first step, that that's where it is. I had no idea Mexico was that place. None. I came back after my first short-term mission trip and said, thank God, we've done that. I've got that box checked off. Rick Warren, I don't have to do it now. I've done it. Everybody's done it. I'm a Christian. And then I was told no, because I was on staff. No, Dave, you got to go back. Suck. So I went back. And then I went back. And I went back. And I went back. And I went back. And, God broke my heart. He broke my heart for Mexico. Who's your heart break for? I think that's the end game, right? It might be right down here in downtown Los Angeles. It might be in China. It might be in Australia. Who knows? But somewhere in there, God's doing that. If you'll let Him. I think that's the hard thing. Right? We have so much other stuff crowding in that we can't open ourselves to it to figure out what it is. But just imagine, right? A church of 100 people, and you started going one by one, and everybody says, yeah, God broke my heart for this people group. What are you doing? Every single day I get up at 5 in the morning and I pray for them. Because I'm not a goer, right? But I'm on my knees every morning at 5 a.m. and I know about that people group. And maybe this person says, I take all of my vacation time. I get a month every year, or I'm a teacher. I get every summer. You know what? I take my whole family and we go here. Because that's where I believe God's called me. Because my heart, was broken for these people. And the other guy gets up and instead of working 5 days a week, he oriented his schedule. So he works 4 10s, right? And he doesn't sit around on that 5th day. But he takes that 5th day And every single Friday, or every other Friday, if he's on this, on some of those schedules, he goes down and he volunteers his time at a local school because his heart's broke for kids and he knows they need help. And he's sitting there with a degree and he can be used with something that he knows. I was with a guy last week, it'll be a week ago Monday, in a small group in Austin, Texas, and we're just talking. And somebody says, well, we brought Dave to share a little bit about Mexico, and so I did. And turns out this guy has a bachelor's and a master's degree from Texas A&M, agriculture and mining, in agricultural science, and he's doing absolutely nothing with it. Right? So I told him what I do with the students from UCLA's AACF group when they come with us. I always sit them down, what's your name, what year are you in school, and what's your major? And they always, they have all these engineering and biochemistry, psycho majors and stuff like that. And I ask them and I say, what are you going to do with that major for the kingdom? And so I looked across at the guy and said, well, let me ask you something. This is what I said. You got these degrees in ag science, what are you doing for the kingdom with them? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, yeah. The kingdom needs you. We can use your expertise. So why don't you come down and help me feed, 60 people with what you know? It's not a big deal, 60 people. Right? But you'll save 60 people's lives. Use the gifts you have. Right? Open yourself to use those gifts you have. Ask God to break your heart for somebody and go do it. It'll change the church. I think that'd be the end goal, right? And I think that was the end goal 50 years ago when whoever it was stood up in the pulpit and said, we need people to give their lives and go and live the rest of their life wherever. You're exactly right. There's probably not going to be a lot of that, much more, because of the whole ability to travel back and forth physically, right? You may physically not see missionaries that spend their entire life again, because maybe that age is closed, right, in another country. But you might see people like Paul, who even when he wasn't with them said, I long to be with you, because his heart was there all the time. I mean, that's where I'm at. Nobody questions me. Right? Where's your heart, Dave? It's in Mexico. My wife knows that. Everybody around me knows that. We need people to give their hearts and open their hearts to the folks that they believe God has broken their hearts for. Now that'll change the church, and that becomes that classic missionary call that we had. That's my thoughts. Questions?